Hey everyone, welcome. Today's a really exciting day here at Fulcrum. We're going to show off Fulcrum Insights in our webinar from field data to answered questions. I'm Jake Freevold, I head up product marketing here, and I've got a lot to show you. I promise most of it will not be slides, but I am going to do a couple of slides just to set some context. I want you to put the software that I'm going to show you into the context of the evolution of inquiry, right? When things started, when humans first roamed the earth, if people wanted to know something, they would ask questions. Worked that way really well all through the 20th century for large chunks of it. Why? Because it's a really simple way to communicate. It's extremely flexible and it's very interactive. If you don't like your answer, you can ask more questions. You can get more detail. So that was the way we all started. Now, then we moved through technology to things like scheduled reports. If anybody remembers those old fat green bar reports that people would get on their desks and throw away, those were the most common way to get information. Now, I want you to think about that. There's a tension between the flexibility of the question and the rigor and repeatability of the reports, right? The reports were there all the time, but people sometimes didn't want them, so they'd throw them out. So we got spreadsheets because reports weren't flexible enough. People could interact with the spreadsheets a little bit more. They had more control, but that was complicated because they had to do the work. So we created static dashboards that would give us literally like a dashboard with all the gauges and charts and everything that helped us understand what was going on in our business. But that was convenient and static. We needed something that was a little bit more flexible. So we started using interactive dashboards. Do you see the tension that goes back and forth between this level of interactivity, getting me what I want, and the ease of getting what you want, having it delivered to you or having it just show up on a screen? The latest evolution in these interactive dashboards includes things like maps and analysis tools, which we're very comfortable with if we understand data really well. But there's a whole crew of people out there who don't necessarily understand data extremely well, or they don't want to know SQL, or they don't want to deal with all the details. And for those people, we need to finish this evolution by going back to the idea, if you want to just know something, just ask. Um, the software that you see on the screen here is what I'll be showing you here in a few minutes. That's Insights from Fulcrum, and the idea behind it is to make things just that simple again. There are use cases for this for the field and the office. I want to emphasize that Fulcrum is very, very field focused. We are field first. In fact, everything we do is about making sure that the field gets what it needs to do its job. But one of the things that the field needs is buy-in. They need people to use that data, because the more they use that data, the more valuable it becomes. So one of the things that we need to focus on is unlocking that data to the broader audience, whether it's to the people who are supporting field crews out in the field themselves, or whether it's to people who have never been out in the field and are making larger scale business decisions. It's really important to get that information to them. And you can see some of the different use cases here, and I'll walk through several of these different use cases during my demo today, but some of them are a little bit more field oriented and some of them are a little bit more office oriented. They're all about making that field data more valuable. So with that in mind, I told you it was going to be quick, right? With that in mind, I'd like to start walking through a demonstration of Insights. And with any luck, yep, here we go. This is my Fulcrum sandbox, and you can see that my top two apps in here are high voltage tower condition assessment and pole inspections. They both have data in them. It is demo data, but I tried to make the demo data as realistic as possible. Obviously, you'll have a lot more realistic data than I do as you use Insights yourself, and I certainly hope you do. If you look over here on the left-hand side, this is where you can find Insights. So clicking on that brings us to a new screen that you've never seen before, where you have the list of previous chats that Insights you've had with Insights in the past, and you can start a new chat either here or obviously down here. I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm going to combine data sources as I do this. I'm going to take that PowerPole app, and I'm going to take the tower inspection app, and I'm going to use both of them together as part of my chat. Now, I'm going to say up front, I'm using live software. I'm using AI, which is non-determinative. In other words, it's going to do what it does, but it might be a little different every time. And I'm using software that is we're still working out aspects of it. So I fully expect that I'm going to break at least one thing here. And break could mean a couple of things. It could mean that I don't get the response back that I expect, and I need to do some hijinks to get it to happen, or something actually doesn't work in the software. That's totally possible. But if it happens, one of the things that I might end up doing is just starting a new chat to begin again. It's to be expected with this kind of software, that we are interacting with it, and that interaction is non-determinative. All right. So what I want to do first is I want to explore this data a little bit. And I specifically want to start by thinking about the status values. That's something that both of my data sets have. So I'm going to ask Insights to please take a look. And I always use please, not because the AI needs me to say please, but to remember to be polite myself. Please take a look at the data values in the status or statues, I'm going to type that a lot today too, fields for this, these, I want both apps. And there's also going to be some pauses here as this works. It uses LLMs behind the scenes, as you might expect, and there is some interaction that has to take place, and the processing responses will occur. I wanted to take a look again at the power pole inspection form, because there's definitely more values in there. Requery the power pole inspection form. There are actually 5. The 5 are not identical, and I want all of the data. Give me all distinct data values. One of the things you'll notice as you work with Insights, as with any LLM, is you will get it'll get smarter as you work with it. So we'll see a little bit as it pauses things, looks specifically at the data, it's going to get better at what it looks like I'm asking for. So one of the first things that you should do is explore the data that you've got. Could be the field data types that you've got, the names of it, and so on. Here it's looking at all of the distinct values for all of the elements in this record, and you know what? I think I grabbed the wrong poll inspection or something. So I'm going to start a new chat. So poll inspection app. I'm going to add that one. Sorry, I didn't do both of them. Poll inspection to work effectively with Insights. That's my demo data. And then I'm going to do the tower again. I'm going to add those two together. So now let's try to do that again. Please show the status values for the poll inspection app, just to make sure I've got this right. The problem with using demo data, of course, is sometimes you got different apps with multiple different sets of data. That's what I was expecting to see now. So show me the tower statuses as well. I should be able to see another 5. As we look at this, you'll see that there needs inspection, awaiting inspection, failed inspection, awaiting QA, and inspection completed. So you'll see that in the tower statuses, they're similar, but not identical. But I can tell the AI that some of these look like they can be mapped together. How would you do that? One of the things that I like about using an AI like this is that it can make suggestions to you about how it would work. And frequently you can say yes if that works for you, or no if it doesn't. So now I'm looking for its insight into how to map these fields together. And you can see that it came up with something correct. QA equals QA, completed equals passed, needs inspection, needs inspection. And at the bottom it says, would you like me to generate a report? No, I don't want you to, but I do want you to use these mappings on all combined queries. And now I'm going to say also create a pie chart of statuses. There is a charting engine inside Insights that's going to help create quite a variety of different charts. Right now, we are focused on making the most used ones available to us. We focused on making them interactive. So you can see, for example, the total number of needs inspections is 1,280, and total inspections awaiting QA is 233, and so on. So now we've got a high-level view of what a combined inspection status might look like. All right. You can do things like list the field names. And of course, I need to get used to the idea that I don't have to do my spelling perfectly right or anything like that with LLMs. I'm still persnickety about that. Pretty old school, I know. But when you look at all of the pole inspection and tower inspection names, you're going to see things that are pretty similar. There's stuff having to do with IDs, right? There are things that have to do with the year that it was installed and PPE that was used. And again, these are not quite exactly the same, but you can see installation date, last inspection date, PPE verified, things of that sort. So I can ask, again, the LLM to help me figure out what those mappings should be. What mappings would you make between these apps? And it takes a second to come back, kind of analyze what these things look like, what the values might be, and then suggest what I should do. And I've run this a bunch of times. Every time it comes back, I'm like, yeah, pretty much that's what I want to see. So let's see if it does the same thing this time. I'm going to note, well, actually, I'll note in a moment. Yeah, so it has come up with a number of things that are direct mappings. This is metadata inside the Fulcrum app itself. And then there's other mappings that are conceptual. So pole ID and tower ID, it did pick up on that. Inspection date, last inspection date. So I do want to keep these mappings consistent. Use these mappings. And then I might want to check certain values, because even though the mapping conceptually is right, we want to make sure that the data inside those values is right. So I want to say something like, show me the distinct values in the repair priority and the priority level. So now what it's doing is it's going out and looking inside the database to say, okay, show me what those things are, and make sure that I know what the data values are. And if I can see those data values, there's more information I can get about how I want to work with this data together. So let me, again, here I think we can see that there's a mapping that makes sense. Emergency is high priority, no action, maybe is no value set, and so on. These look like they map together as well. How would you do it? It'll come back with a response for me. I'm probably going to like that. The one thing that I notice sometimes is it handles null values in a different way than it handles actual values. So sometimes when I've done this, it comes back and says, I've got a no action required and a separate null value. But in this case, as happens most of the time when I've done this, it says, oh, I can map no action to no value set. So yes, I want you to use these mappings. And now I want it to create a pie chart of this, pie chart of priorities. And it should come back to me with, again, a pie chart that shows me the information I'm looking for. I'm going to reduce the sidebar here, by the way, so this pops up a little better. And something I haven't shown you yet is that you can adjust the size here if you need to see more. So here's my pie chart. It shows me the combined repair priorities. But then it occurs to me as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, what I really want to know is, I want to know what the priorities are per inspector. I want to know which inspectors have higher priorities versus less priorities. Maybe that'll help me with manpower. So now I want to say, create a stacked bar of priorities by inspector. And I don't need a particular order for this, so I'm going to tell it no order by on that either. And when I do that, it should come back not with a simple pie chart that gives me this kind of relatively straightforward, simple data that doesn't tell me as much. I'm going to give it a little bit more room here because it's going to come back with a stacked bar that shows me all of the information about all of the inspectors that I have. So you can see the number of records that I have and what priorities each of those records is. All right. Now what that's pretty cool that I can do that. One of the things I might want to do is say, well, show me the query that I used to get that information. And Insights is smart enough to come back and say, okay, here's exactly how I did what I was looking for, what you asked for. It'll just tell you in this case, the SQL, the SQL that is more complicated than I want to write. I've written SQL before, but I don't really remember how to do case logic correctly, and I don't remember how to do the case logic in the union, and like there's a lot of stuff here, and I don't have to worry about it. It'll tell me how it did it, and this will help you when you're trying to justify the results of the insights back to other people who need to hear it. You could give this to IT and say, this is what this query was. You could give it to other people and say, this is exactly what we ran to get the information we were looking for. So it's really good from that perspective. All right, now I want to focus on tower inspections again, just strictly on tower inspections. Let's look just at towers. The fact that I'm using both data sets doesn't mean I have to have every query using both data sets. So now I want to look at the high and medium priorities that are greater than 30 days, because that's one of the criteria we had, right, is that a high priority would be resolved in less than 30 days. So how many high or medium priority records are greater than 30 days old from, and I'm going to say from today, which is 03/12/2026, because I've got multiple dates in my data and I just want to make sure it doesn't get confused on the wrong one. Like, so not only does Insights get smarter, you get smarter as you use it, about how to use it. So there are 9 high or medium priorities towers that are more than 30 days old. So I want to maybe make that, I'd like you to create a bar chart by inspector. And when I do that, it should give me the results. And I see that Jaco Pastorius is our problem child here. So I need to make sure that we're going back and getting everything that Jaco's done to the right places. Now I want to potentially talk about safety. And when I talk about safety, I want to look at when it's not safe to proceed. So let me explain the workflow to you a little bit. You drive up in the pole inspection, you drive up to the pole, and if it's safe to proceed, then you do, and if not, then you say, no, it's not safe to proceed, and you have to give a reason for the work stoppage, right? So we are trying to get people to think safety all the way through. Well, if that happens, then theoretically, if it's not safe to proceed, then there should be no data that has there should be no data that has in the inspection section. So now I have to actually write that out instead of saying it to you. So how many records have not safe to proceed, but it looks like they inspected something anyway? And I'm actually going to ask it, how would you identify those? Because I want it to know, I don't want to have to tell it, here are all the individual fields you should look at. I want it to tell me, this is what it looks like I should look at. Maybe it'll come up with some thoughts that I didn't actually have when I was looking at what was being built. So it tells me that I'm going to isolate the stop work records. So any of those where it was safe to proceed is no, that's a correct answer. Look for evidence of further work. So any of the following sections, these 3 sections are the sections that they're sections that are only visible actually when the stop work records, when the safe to proceed is is yes. So there should be nothing in here. And sure enough, I see that the result is 0. That's the result of putting in that safeguard that I said, where it only exposes these sections if it is safe to proceed. So that's working, and there are no imported records that are showing problems there either. So that's good. Now I'd like to look for make suggestions about other QA ideas. I don't have to be the only one coming up with thoughts here. I can ask the AI itself to look at the data that's in the records. It's going to look primarily at the field names first, understand what those fields are talking about, what the semantics are. And then it's going to say, okay, well, here are some other things that might be quality related checks that we could do. And you can drill down pretty far on this. The first 3 or 4 are usually pretty good. So contradictory information, that's good. Replacement recommended, yes, and repair priority is no action. That's a great call. If a replacement is recommended, then I definitely have a repair priority on that. The checking for incompleted records, it was, that I think is pretty rudimentary. Process bottlenecks, awaiting for QA, and the last updated date is much earlier, and photo and media compliance. Those are all good. What I want to specifically do in my case is I want to say, look for a conflict between immediate repair needed, that's one of the record labels, and priority level. So now it's just saying, okay, well, if immediate repair is needed, priority level should be high. Let's take a look and see if there are any records like that here. To find the conflicts, it's giving you the methodology that it's using, which is great. It helps you understand what it's trying to accomplish. And all right, and I know what's going on here. Use record ID instead of resource ID. This should clear it up. There's a constant process in working with this that means that we're constantly updating the prompt and updating the information that it has in the system. So there are times when the prompt is changing, and what you're seeing is a little bit of that change happening now. I'm not currently seeing any visualizations here, so I'm going to move on from there. And I'll instead look for another use case, which is a different kind of QA, which is not about the data itself, but about QAing the inspection process. So I'd like to see show records from with the last inspection date of 3/11/2026, that's yesterday, with a status of QA enabled. Do this for both apps. Put it in the chat and link to the record. Now, what's cool about this is it's going to help me be able to say, okay, well, what do I need to look at? And it's going to lead me directly to those records that I need to evaluate. So let's give it a second to go through all of that. It's looking through pole inspections, and for the tower assessments, it's telling me that what it's using, inspection date versus last inspection date, right, and the QA status. And as it processes that response, and it found the individual Fulcrum records that I now need to QA. So if this is my workflow, I'm probably doing something like this. I'm probably just like opening each one of these things up in its own tab. I'll do those 3, I'll do a couple here, and now I come over to those in the tab and say, okay, well, here I am in the pole inspections, right? You can see this is the pole inspections app, and the inspection date was March 11th, and I can see that the status was awaiting QA. So I would do my QA here and then close out the record. Same thing here, pole inspection. You saw me open 3 pole inspections, so here we go, March 11th. awaiting QA. Let's close that down. And then finally, I've switched over now to the high voltage tower condition assessment. My metadata still shows me awaiting QA, and you can see that the last inspection date was March 11th. So I can make my changes here or my comments, do my QA, and shut that record down too. So I can actually see all of the records that I need to QA just by putting it into a list like this and then walking through that list to make sure that I'm doing the job that I need to do. And of course, it doesn't have to just be awaiting QA and the date. It can be whatever kind of requirements you have for your tasking. So finally, let's do a set of, let's look at pole inspections only. And I want to show failed and needs inspection records on a map, and I want failed records on top. And what I mean by that is I want to make sure that those dots are visible. Now, you might be thinking this is kind of like what I do in Fulcrum in the when I'm looking at the data in Fulcrum, right, in the visualizer. And that's true, but this map is not yet interactive. This is something that's on our roadmap, something that we're looking at doing. How can I make this more interactive? So this is more about giving you some kind of insight that you can get an understanding of. And I want those dots to be on top because I'm not drilling down further into those dots necessarily. But I have the ability to see clusters of information, and I can see where my issues are. I can see a lot in Florida, for example. I see a lot in the Washington to New York corridor, Washington to Boston really corridor, and maybe there are things that I do or know that will help me understand what's going on there. You can do more with this visualization, but I'm going to hold it there for now until a couple of minutes from now. I can do things like say, how many inspectors are there in Virginia and North Carolina? List their names. Helps me understand what kind of tasking I'm doing, what people I have devoted to these particular tasks. And I'm going to use that in a minute as well. So looking at the pole inspections app, getting the list of the names and the count. There are 12 inspections. Well, what I really wanted is which ones are in which states. Maybe they're all in both states. I don't know, but we're going to find out. And then something I'm going to do with respect to personnel is to target one particular person and talk about the workload that that person has and so on. Okay, so it is different people in different states. You can see that I've got a number here and a number here. You can see that Soar is in both of them. Fernando Soar, brilliant classical guitarist. He's inspecting poles in both states. If you ask it, sometimes when I've asked this question, it came back and said, yes, there's overlap, and you volunteered that information to me. Sometimes you need to ask for that information. Non-determinative, you don't know exactly what you're going to get until you get it, but have those thoughts in mind about what you want to explore as you use insights. Now I want to focus on one of them, Anton Reika. Anton is at the Philly Museum of Art. How many poles are within 3 miles of him? Anton found himself with some free time today, right? He did something. He was supposed to do some particular work. A meeting ended early. I don't know what it was, but he's got a little bit of time, and he's near the Philly Museum of Art. What I should have done, and I'll have to ask again, is can you show me the ones that are only for only that need inspection or need reinspection. There are 10 poles within a 3 mile radius. Plot those that are needs inspection or reinspection and put them into the chat with links. And what I should see next is the map focusing in on that area right around the Philly Museum of Art and the polls that are in place for Anton to go check out. Now, some of this data sits on top of each other, so some of these polls are actually duplicates, but getting the list of 10, and here they are mapping. So I can just copy this and put it into a text if I want to. I could put it in, I could send it to him any way that I want to, or I could open it up and assign one of these to him if I have assignment for my app. So you could come in here and update it, create it, etc. If there is assignment in here, then you could assign it directly to Anton at that point. So that's great. We've got some work cut out for Anton now, and one of our most experienced and valued employees is not going to waste. Now, I do have an issue because Anton is going on leave, and I need to redistribute his workload. Who else in the same state can I distribute that workload to, and how will that affect their workloads? So we're kind of doing some rudimentary planning here, right? I've got an issue where somebody's going out. I need, if they do 100, or if they do 5, or if they do whatever, I need to distribute that over the broader team. So I'm focusing on the same state where Anton works. I am taking the total number, it should be taking the total number of records that Anton has and pushing it out to those others. Inspections in these 11 different states, that's great. Inspectors in, well, actually, let me just ask it. How many of the inspectors also work in those states? It's slightly different from the way I did it originally, but it's giving me an opportunity to try something new, so I'm trying something new. And if it fails, that's how you know it's a live demo. So it's going to have to check and see which ones. So it's got which other inspectors, how many inspectors are in each one of these. That's great. And distribute among the PA and VA workers. Create a bar chart to show me what the workloads currently are for those workers. And what I should get back is some sense of how much Anton has to do now that I know how many he's done. Did it actually answer that question here? Nope, it didn't. Oh, yeah. Nope, it didn't say. So visualize the current workloads and how many needs the additional work. So calculating the amount that Anton's active workload in those same states is going to see how redistributing it matters. The workload to redistribute, Anton has 56 active inspections. There are 8 other inspectors. Do the math, it's 7 other jobs that each one needs to do. You could do more and try to rejigger the numbers a little bit to maybe these 2 are overloaded and you want to distribute it out here. Maybe though these 2 work in a more close area and these work further out in the country, and therefore drive time matters, and each pole inspection itself takes longer. So there are different things that you might think about that I'm not going to get into right now, but this is one of the ways that you can at least get a feel for what it's going to take in order to have Anton's work redistributed when he goes out on leave. So I've been talking now for about a half an hour on the demo. What I'd like to do now is go back, give you just a little bit more of a sense of what you should look at as you're using Insights. We'll talk a little bit about futures, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So one of the things I said very early on is make sure you explore your data. And this is true whether you work primarily in the field or whether you work primarily in the office. Explore the data because you want to make sure it looks like the way you expect it to. We are generating queries. You saw me pull out a query that Insights had generated. We are generating queries, and those queries are repeatable. So it's not like the AI is just kind of going and looking at records and coming back with an answer. It's not like that. It's actually generating something that should be repeatable. So make sure it looks like you expect it. That's how I picked up on the error that I made where apparently I grabbed the wrong pole inspection app because the data looked wrong to me, right? So do that exploration. That also helps Insights get familiar with the data you're working with. It gets smarter as you walk through questions with it. It will begin to understand, okay, the following people are in the following states. It'll understand, okay, the following states are represented, and it'll start to give you better results as you use it over time. That's one of the reasons I think that I like to use Insights with a single chat that goes on for a while before starting a new chat, if I can possibly do that. There are some new chats that I will do that are fully dedicated to a specific topic, but for things where I can be a little bit more general purpose about one app or a couple apps I've got, I kind of like to have that longer context window. And note that because it generates these repeatable queries, it's going to be able to give you explanations. Ask it for the query, ask it why it did what it did. Now you saw here that we've kind of taught it, for now at least, to over communicate a little bit, to tell you more than you expect necessarily from the AI, to tell you the methodology it used. So that's all great. But if there's something where you're like, I'm not sure about that, go back and ask it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's smart enough to know what it did and why it did it and where it's running into trouble. Feel free to just go back and ask more stuff of it. Like to just briefly talk about the fact that this is something that is good in its current state, but it is still in a beta form and is being developed rapidly, not only to make it more robust because of the robustness that everybody needs, but also to make it so that there's more capability directly in there. One of the first things that we got asked when people saw this is, can I download these artifacts? I want that chart to be something that I can put into other other formats, other places. And the answer is not right now. You can take those, you can take a screenshot, obviously, of it. You won't have the interactivity that you get with the charts that you saw on when I was interacting with those charts. So being able to download those artifacts is something that's first on our plate. And another thing that people immediately ask for is, how do I assemble these things into a dashboard? I've got something that I think is really useful. How do I put it together? So that's coming. You're going to see a lot of work done on the improved charts and expanded chart types. I showed you a couple of basics here, like the pie and the bar and the stacked bar. Those are all very good, but we're using the engine. We're increasing the power of that charting engine to be able to tap into a lot more different chart types, which is going to be great. Permission structures are changing. One thing that I think is really cool, you saw now today that I put together 2 different Fulcrum apps. Well, if you think about what that means, then if you got one Fulcrum app that contains the inspections you're doing and another Fulcrum app that contains the data that you pulled down from Maximo, then you can do queries that bring together Maximo data and Fulcrum data right there in Insights. You don't have to go get your Power BI license, and you don't have to ask your IT people to do it. You don't have to know SQL. You just say, hey, can you talk about these 2 apps, one of which is primarily a database and one of which is primarily an action oriented artifact. We're looking at incorporating non-Fulcrum data into Insights even without having that separate app in place. So be on the lookout for that. That's a little bit longer term, I think, but it's something that's going to be very exciting and is going to make it possible to do a lot of different kinds of queries inside Fulcrum that otherwise you would have to use other tools to do, and you might have to rely on your more technical staff to make it happen. This is part of Fulcrum's phased approach to AI. We started with audio fast fill, which has been in production since 2025. Right now, you're seeing Insights, which is an open beta. We're working very quickly on something called photo fast fill, which is currently in the early adopter phase, where we have individuals who are coming to us and saying, yeah, I want to try that specific thing out. It's call it pre-beta, but that is the kind of thing where you could take potentially a picture of a faceplate on a piece of equipment and would read off what the voltage is, what, is it 3-phase or not, if it's a pump, how many, what's the capacity rating, the gallons per minute rating, whatever it may be. All of that information can come out of a photo, and we're working on that as well. So Insights is here, and you should be using it if you're interested in using it. We're very interested in turning that capability on and making sure that you've got access to it. Photo fast fill is a little bit more tightly held, but it's something that's very cool, and we're also looking for people who are interested in looking at that too. On the way to a fully realized vision, we're going to be able to do things like anomaly detection, or what I like to call sanity checks. We're going to be able to make sure that the AI is able to guide you through a process. So you're not looking at the screen as much to see what you've got to do next. The AI can tell you what happens next. And then ultimately, we're looking at having a fully hands-free experience where you put on smart glasses, and the smart glasses know what you're doing, see what you see, hear what you see, and talk to you about what should be happening now. And that should be a really incredible experience. In fact, it's so incredible that Kurt, who's in the background right now, is going to put the video that it's about 2.5 minutes long that shows you exactly what that vision looks like. And if you have not yet seen it, I encourage you to look at it. It's going to be amazing. Right now, we're in the building block phase of making that happen for our customers and changing the state of field work in the process. With all of that, I'd like to open up the floor for questions, and let me see about getting. Whoop, yeah, now you're seeing other things. Hang on a second. Let me stop sharing. All right. Let's talk. Let's get some questions, shall we? I'll pull them up. We are providing recordings. That's something that people, someone's asking. We are providing recordings. One of the questions I've got is, what LLM are you using? And I don't want to answer that definitively because we are not necessarily focused on which LLM platform we are going to be using throughout our life cycle. LLMs are changing. The capabilities are changing. There's a massive gold rush to get the best LLMs for various purposes. And some of those LLMs are going to be excellent for certain things and less excellent for others. Like you can see how some people use one LLM for code and another LLM to do, writing. Those are two very different use cases. And as a result, we have we do not want to commit to a specific LLM. We are evaluating those LLMs to make sure we know which ones are the most robust and going to be able to give us the best capabilities for all of our requirements. The field has very strong demands. We want to make sure that the LLM is going to be able to handle those demands. We want those demands to include the capabilities for audio fast fill, as well as for insights, as well as for other kinds of AI requirements that we have. So there are going to be multiple, there's the potential for us to switch out LLMs in a way that you as the user should basically not notice. And I don't want to commit to saying we're going to use one LLM or another at this time. I see a hand raised, and if you could put your question into the chat, that would be really useful. Can I update Fulcrum records with this? No, this is a read-only kind of environment right now. We did not put in and do not currently want to put in an update capability in the sites. We just don't think that the technology, it's not really about Fulcrum, it's about the technology itself not being ready to handle that kind of use case. And it would be far too risky for 99.9% of our clients. So we're not doing that first. We're focused on other requirements prior to that. Can Insights identify photos? For example, can I ask it to give me all photos with trees? I haven't asked that question, and this is from Carla. Carla, I will get back to you with an answer on that. I don't actually have an answer to that myself. If anybody who is from the company on the webinar right now has an answer, you can put that into the questions as well. Does Insights have access to all the data in my organization or just the data that I have access to? I actually, within my organization could mean more than one thing. Obviously, Fulcrum does not have insights to all of the data within your complete IT organization. So it is we're talking about Fulcrum data that it's really looking at. In the future, we are looking at adding in that capability to access other organizational data. I think what might have been asked is the data in my Fulcrum org. In other words, does it have access to all of the data that's within my org, or if I have access, is it only the data that I have access to? I'm going to ask Adrian, who I know is online right now, to pop the answer to that question into the chat as well. Will Insights be an additional cost also versus the regular Fulcrum membership? That is right now, it's not being added as an extra cost. We are trying to get an understanding for what the market actually looks like, for the amount of usage, for the amount of cost it brings to us based on the number of tokens that we use, and quite a number of different things. So right now it is free and open to use for anybody who uses Fulcrum, but we anticipate that being an enterprise feature probably in the future. Um, can the route map integrate with a work order, and could it indicate or estimate drive times? The answer to that, I think, is maybe. So let's talk about the way that you integrate with a work order. Frequently, if you're dealing with, let's say, a Maximo work order, then the Maximo work order data, somebody enters that work order in Maximo, that data gets reflected into a Fulcrum app that contains the same data. So obviously, it's going to have that information, no problem. And then it could, then Insights has access to all of the information it needs. And if you want to get a map for it, personally, I am not going to try to make Insights determine what that drive time would look like. It's not really designed for that. I would just have it create me a URL that's going to push me to Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever it is that I use, and then let that dedicated platform do that kind of estimation work for me. I have a response from the dev team. It says it can't see photos, but it can look at data about the photos like captions. So it has access to caption data, but it will only know that you're looking at photos of trees if you say that it's a photo of a tree in the caption. That's what I'm getting from that. Insights has the same permission as the user, so it only has access to the same data that you do. So it's secure in that you only are allowed to get access to the data that you are allowed to see. Let me see. There's somebody asking about a route map for a specific inspector. I think that's the same thing I just answered. Do I need a connection in the field for this? Yes, it runs on it uses an LLM, so you do need a connection in the field. I should point out, though, when we talk about LLM, and this is true also for that earlier little bit of discussion where I talked about whether or not what kind of LLM we would use. There's a lot of effort going on right now in the AI community to reduce the size of the LLM and make what they call a small language model. And those are more likely to fit on a single device instead of being accessed by a server. As that technology advances, we're consistently looking for ways to bottle up basically the necessary capabilities for audio fast fill and photo fast fill and Insights to be able to deploy that on device and make that available. That is, though, an industry issue. It's not really a Fulcrum issue. It's just that capability doesn't exist in the market at the moment. Let me see if I got all the questions. I think I might have. That is all the questions I've got. I want to thank everybody. You had a lot of other things you could have done today, and you chose to spend it with us learning about this cool new technology. So please reach out to us. Reach out to your account executive if you're a Fulcrum customer and want to make sure that you've got Insights turned on. That's true for anything that we're doing with Fulcrum and AI right now. And please make sure that you reach out to us for any other requirements you got. Sorry, I got distracted because we did have one last question come in. Don, you're just under the wire. Will Fulcrum AI work on pad mount equipment, vaults, manholes, secondary networks where lines and equipment are in close proximity? Don, I'd want to talk to you about the use case. And actually, you should really talk to somebody who goes deeper than I do about that use case, about what you want the AI to do. If you're talking about having it do some kind of specific analysis on that, if you're having it do, if you're just trying to understand what specifically is there in the record, and that's like, I don't, not without knowing more about the use case, I don't feel like I can fully answer that question. So get in touch with us and we'd be happy to talk about that use case. That's how we grow our product and how we learn that stuff. Robert Hughes says, I mentioned the smart glasses video. I think if you look in the chat, yes, if you look in the chat in the interface, there's the questions tab, which has a question mark in it. Then there's a chat tab, which has like the little question bubbles inside of it, one on top of the other. In that chat, there is a YouTube link that says, check out our AI Vision demo. If by any chance you don't see that or can't find it or whatever, feel free to just reach out to us. We're happy to share it, or go to our YouTube channel, Fulcrum app. And when you go there, it'll be one of the easiest ones to find out there. So do check out that AI vision video. There's one for power and there's one for water, and they're both very similar in the kinds of things that they show. Anyway, now I really am going to sign off. Thank you all very much for your time and attention today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you soon. Take care.